Towards the beginning of the 1500s, a Catholic monk named Martin Luther learned about the selling of indulgences to raise money to fund the building of the St. Peter's Basilica. Martin Luther was a dedicated monk, and seeing how the church was using religion to raise money deeply angered him. Luther began to write a paper now known as the 95 Theses. Thousands of copies of this paper was created and distributed throughout all of Germany, and during the next few years, Luther became more and more popular, ending up with him creating a brand new religion known as Lutheranism. As the 1500s continued, England started having more issues with religion. People such as Martin Luther had become more of a threat towards the church, starting his own religion called Lutheranism. And in all of this, the king, who at the time was King Henry VIII, was not helping the church get rid of these issues. Instead, King Henry VIII decides he wants to divorce his current wife, Catherine of Aragon. You see, he wanted a son, but he could not get one out of his first wife, getting his first daughter, Mary. But, because the Pope was not willing to annul his marriage, he went to the highest church courts. The Archbishop Thomas Cranmer on May 1533 ruled that King Henry's first marriage was now void, giving him the ability to remarry. In the beginning of June, King Henry married his next wife, Anne, who bared Henry his second daughter, Elizabeth, who grew up to be Queen Elizabeth I. Of course, this was not what King Henry wanted. He wanted a son. So, in 1534, Parliament broke England away from the Catholic Church. This was the Act of Supremacy, which stated that the king was the only supreme head on earth of the Church of England. A man by the name of Thomas More attempted to oppose this act and was beheaded almost immediately. This new act caused King Henry to go on a power trip, shutting down monasteries and selling said land. Along with all of this power, the king also had an increase in his paycheck. Of course, Henry's goal was still to find a son, so after marrying his third and final wife, Jane Seymour, he caught his son, which he named Edward VI. Only 9 years after Edward's birth, King Henry passed away, giving his power to his one and only son. Of course, living in the 1500s means that most people were subjugated to disease, which Edward was. Before Edward VI even reached age 16, he was killed by tuberculosis, leaving the throne open. Being the older daughter, Mary I came to the throne in 1553, and people were ready for her to finally do something about restoring England back to its Catholic roots. But this was not the case. Mary I went on a killing spree, persecuting 300 Protestants as heretics and burning them at stakes. This earned her her name, Bloody Mary. At the end of her reign, all Mary did was make England even more committed to the Protestant faith. Although to the church it may seem like a bad thing, the Protestant Reformation was very good for expanding knowledge and education. Protestant teachers were very skilled at using humanism to teach their classes. Also, marriage was sort of reformed. The Reformation had gotten rid of monasticism, but the roles of the man being in charge, while the wife was an obedient house servant, remained. One thing that did not change during the Reformation was the views on Jews. Those that did not convert to Lutheranism were to live in the ghettos. As Calvinism and Lutheranism started to take more and more land, the Catholic Church began to realize they need to do something or else they'll be run over by the competing religions. So they started something that would be known as the Catholic Reformation. This Reformation was the beginning of a new order called the Jesuits. These Jesuits were founded by a Spanish nobleman named Ignatius of Loyola. Pope Paul III recognized this group as a religious order in 1540. These Jesuits swore an oath to the Pope of absolute obedience. The Jesuits' main goal was to use their knowledge and education to spread their message across Europe. The second order was the Order of Papacy. The amount of corruption that had going on in the church was too much for Pope Paul III. So, he made the step of creating something called a Reform Commission, which blamed all of the problems within the church on the Pope's corruption. Finally, there was an Order of the Council of Trent, a group of cardinals, bishops, archbishops, abbots, and theologians that would meet every so often for 18 years in the city of Trent. In conclusion, the English Reformation was a very progressive idea, but it brought people to be less corrupt and actually make a change.